Hi, everybody. Jen Hatmaker here, your host of the For the Love podcast. Welcome to the show. Oh, I always love these days. I love new series days. Today, we're kicking off a brand new series. We really spent a lot of time on this one. It is called For the Love of Peace. Our last series of 2023, if you can even believe it. We always think critically about how to end the year. And it always just feels precious to me in a season of such activity and motion and busyness and just all this additional weight put onto the life that we're already living, to steer the podcast into a place of respite and rest and peace. And so when I tell you, I am eager to introduce our topic today, I was so looking forward to this conversation. We're talking about rest today. If you're anything like me, you're not getting nearly enough of it, but this is more than just what you think. I'm not just talking about sleep. This tendency to just let the hustle and the bustle of the holidays intrude on what our bodies need is just ubiquitous. And it's not just this season either. I mean, this is the American way of life. And so you're probably like me in that you find and have plenty of excuses for why we're not resting or refueling in a way that makes any sense at all for our bodies. Intro excuses. I'm just a really busy mom. I'll calm down once this project is over. Let me get to this deadline. This is just a season. Once I meet this goal, I'll slow down. I know. I mean, I do this all the time. I can constantly push off a better pace, a saner schedule to next week, right? But we never get there. And instead, we have this sort of national, crisis really, of just constant burnout and exhaustion and depletion. And there has to be a better way, because we deserve to feel whole and complete and restored, right? And work from a place of fulfillment. So I'm just really interested in that conversation. I'm really interested in a paradigm shift here, which is why I have Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, the perfect person to talk about this today with us. She is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She's a speaker, global. She's an award-winning author, and genuinely like an international thought leader around this exact idea. If that doesn't keep her busy enough, she is the CEO of Restorasis, which is a professional development agency that works with companies and employers who want to prioritize their employees, want them to succeed, and want them to avoid burnout. So she comes in as this doctor in all of these corporate environments and teaches the people inside their company how to avoid burnout, how to really rest. She's been featured all over the place, like Women's Day, Fox, Psychology Day, TED Talk, everywhere. Okay. She has an incredible book that I am excited for you to check out. It's called Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity. Okay. Yes. She's got a free assessment tool, which she's going to mention here in a minute, at restquiz.com. 250,000 people have taken that free quiz and discovered where their rest deficit is, which you may be like me. We are not just talking about sleep. She's going to discuss with us in this interview 7 types of rest, and only 1/2 of one of them involves sleep. So this might be a broader conversation than you think. And I know as soon as she started parsing out the different types of fatigue and exhaustion that we experience outside of just hours a night, I'm like, yeah. Yep. And this is very possible. Something she said at the very end was tons of these tiny little levers that we can pull to renew our bodies and brains and souls. They're less than 5 minutes. This is possible. Okay. We're not talking about taking a sabbatical. We're not talking about getting 10 hours of sleep at night. These are smaller possibilities that restore our minds and bodies. Because as she said, the whole idea of rest is part of the word restoration. So let's really get into what it looks like to be restored today. So I'm so pleased to share my fascinating conversation with the lovely, smart, and wonderful Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. Okay, Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, welcome to the show. I'm really delighted to have you here. It was funny. I was getting ready for this interview and I was thinking, you know what? I'm doing pretty good on rest right now. I feel like I am going to have I get an A plus from Dr. Saundra when we have this interview. And then I was really going through all my questions and I'm like, maybe not. Maybe I'm not doing that great. I am thrilled that you have pressed into this particular niche of really mental health. There's an undeniable link. And so I'm excited for everybody to hear from you. Before we get into it, would you mind I've already told my listeners, I kind of high leveled your very impressive credentials. Good night. Do you mind just also telling my community in your own words, kind of, this is who you are, this is where you live, these are who your people are, and this is kind of your general deal in the world?
Yeah. So my people are my husband of 23 years. I have two sons. One is a sophomore in college. The other one is in his senior year. So I am trying to figure out what the empty nest is going to look like from this stage forward. Clinical practice for 20 years, burned out when I had my kids. So about 15 years ago. And that's what took me on this journey to really wanting to look at how do I stay in a challenging profession and not feel depleted all the time. And I wasn't finding what I was looking for in conventional medicine. With a biochemistry background, my tendency is to break things down to the molecules. So I kind of wanted to look at the finer nuggets of what rest looks like. And that's kind of what took me on this journey. So now my primary focus is really just helping people enjoy their life more, to get to a place where they are pouring out good into the world without getting to the end of themselves in the process.
Listen, based on what you just said, I have this mental image of all of my listeners in all the states and countries they're in going, wait a minute, what did you just say? They just turned up the volume. They're like, everybody be quiet. I need to listen to this. I feel like you just described all of us. I'm burned out. I can't find what I need. Conventional stuff isn't working. What could it be as simple as sleep? Is it even possible? And could be, right? Real quick before we get into it, let's hear about that. I have 5 kids and my youngest is a senior. So I'm where you're at right now in that, like, wow, this house is about to get empty. How are you doing? Now you've already launched one, so you know how it is. It's you know that you have muscle memory for that, but it's a different thing having no kids in the house. You feeling good?
I am. My husband and I are already making plans. That's helped because it's like, okay, we're not just going to be sitting around. So we actually are looking at, you know what, when I do a lot of traveling to speak. So it's like, you know what, you can actually come with me. My husband does IT, so his work is primarily virtual. And so it's like, you know, this could be a really good thing. We could actually have fun all around the world while I'm traveling to speak.
I love it. I love it for you. People always ask me, like, oh my gosh, empty nest. I mean, I was a parent when I was 23. So I started really young and they're like, are you just so devastated? And I'm like, no, I am not devastated. And of course not. Okay, here we go. Back to this. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind, you touched down on it. You gave us just a little bloop, but could you go back and talk a little bit more about that time in your personal life, your actual career, your actual like new young motherhood, in which none of the things that you were doing as a medical expert were working to keep your head above water, how that felt, what you examined, and then we'll find our way into sort of rest and how you discovered that as a real, genuine medical solution.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was when my thought process, I'm a planner. Let me just start with that. I'm a type A planner type person. I have a plan for everything. And so I had planned out my life from the moment I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I knew when I was going to have kids, when I was getting married, I had all the plans. And so for me, kids came around the time when I was hoping to have kids. And I thought, oh, I'm ready. I'm 5 years into clinical practice. I've got this down. I figured out, I have a schedule. I figured all of this out. What I didn't realize is kids are a full-time job, and each one is another full-time job because they're completely different people. And so when my second child was born, I was not prepared as well as I thought I was. And I got to a situation where one day I picked them up from daycare, and, it'd been a full day I'm in internal medicine. So I'm at the hospital and my clinical practice. So I picked them up, got home, and I was just so depleted. And I put them, I set them down just to watch TV so I could have a moment. And I was so tired. I just laid out on my foyer floor, and I'm in this gigantic house my dream house for all in, just for clarification, it wasn't like any house. It's the house I dreamed of. My dream house, looking up at this giant chandelier with the man I love, with these kids I'd prayed forever for. And I'm thinking, this is the life I asked for. Why does it feel so horrible to live it? And it made no sense, because it's like, I'm a planner. I planned this thing down to the details, and in God's grace, I guess, because it didn't feel graceful at the moment, I had everything that I asked, and I felt miserable. And I'm laying on this floor with just tears, running down my face. And I'm thinking, if I plan to get here, then there's got to be some changes that can get me somewhere else, because this isn't success. Success isn't feeling successful. And, one of the things that helped me in that journey as I processed through that was my background says, if you see a problem, then you have to evaluate where is the root of the problem and fix it. I mean, it's the nature of medicine. And so for myself, I initially thought, I'm a young mom, I just need more sleep. Well, being in internal medicine, I have the privilege of being able to actually test my sleep and do all the studies on myself that I choose to do. And I did that. For a season, got 8-9 hours of sleep, and I could document it's solid sleep, and I was still waking up tired. Now, that is a desperate situation when the thing you think and the thing conventional medicine tells you should be fixing you doesn't work. And that's when I realized there is something else. Sleep is not the only thing. There's something else in me that's exhausted that I haven't identified, and that's where I need to put my focus. And so that's where the whole research on rest came from. It was getting to a realization that sleep and rest are not the same thing. And because we have associated them with being the same thing, we use the words almost interchangeably. It has boxed some of us in because we are getting sleep, but then we're still exhausted when we wake up in the morning. And so that's kind of the first disconnect I had to make within myself and with anybody that I work with, is that they're not the same things. They work in congruency with each other, but they're completely different entities.
So if you were going to give us the 30,000 foot distinction between sleep and rest, and then I'd like to funnel in to what you have identified as the 7 types of rest, what's the primary difference?
Yeah, the primary difference is sleep is actually just one component of a type of rest. As you mentioned, my research has shown 7 different areas. And so of those 7 different areas, we have physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative. Well, under physical, that's just one of the 7. Under physical, we have 2 types, passive and active. Sleep is a passive type of physical rest. So when we put all of our buckets into sleep, we are in essence canceling out all of the other things I just mentioned. because you can't get creative rest with your eyes closed in the bed. You can't get emotional rest in the bed with your eyes closed. There's certain types of rest that you cannot hope to accomplish restoring with simply sleeping.
This is fascinating. I wonder if you could back up one step, list those 7 types of rest again, and can you sort of discuss those? Like, what do you mean by those? And if they are not accessed through just slumber, what do those look like in a real life?
Yeah. So if we look at physical, we mentioned physical has both the passive and the active. So passive is sleeping and napping. Then the active component of physical rest include those things that improve your body circulation and your lymphatic drainage and your muscle flexibility. So everything from using a foam roller to, stretch out your fascia, to getting a massage, to doing a leisure walk, to stretches, to yoga. So it's those things that improve your flow within your body, but are not laying still. When we think about rest, I think sometimes we get under the impression that rest is just about cessation. It's just about stopping. But rest is really at its core about restoration. How do we pour back into places that are depleted? How do we bring them back to a healthy spot? And so that's the active component of physical rest. When we look at mental rest, a lot of us have mental rest deficits. And I describe it like this. I'll give a couple of examples. If you're someone who you're tired, you lay down at night and you close your eyes, but the second you close your eyes, you're thinking all the thoughts. You're thinking about your to-do list. You're thinking about your activities that you did earlier in the day. You're rehashing conversations. That's a mental rest deficit. You can't get your mind to quiet down. Chronic worrying is a mental rest deficit. You're doing rumination thoughts on negative things. If you find that you have a hard time concentrating or recalling, you walk in the store and you're going to pick up a couple of items, you can't recall exactly what it was you were picking up, or you can't recall why you walked from one room to the next. Mental rest deficits, all relating to the same thing. Our brain's not able to focus and have clarity. And some ways to improve that, if you're someone who has a tendency to do excessive multitasking, in other words, you have 20 tabs, 15 tabs open on your computer, you're jumping from one thing to the next, you're in and out of your inbox all day long. Multitasking has a tendency to train the brain not to recall, because why should it have to recall something if it can just open up another tab? And so we have to recognize that some of the activities that we do actually keep us from being able to get that mental rest that we need, that ability to clear our thoughts. And if you're someone who has that problem with at night, you can't clear your mind, doing something as simple as having sometimes we call it a brain dump, or just having a notepad or journal or something that you're going to jot down whatever you're thinking. The way the brain processes information is when you are ruminating over something, you're actually training your brain that you're almost studying that information. Rumination is the same thing you did when you were studying for a chemistry test or a spelling test. So when you jot it down, it gives the brain permission to release that information. It's no longer responsible for studying it and holding on to that bit of information. So that's a simple tactic that anyone can do if you notice that that's a problem that you're having at nighttime.
My gosh, I want you to talk for 1,000 hours. Yeah, I mean, that is obviously true. I can even just access this sort of mental relief I feel when I feel like I have too much to do and I'm behind and they're swirling and I can't grab, and I just write them down. Like, okay, just make a janky list on a scratch piece of paper. These are the things that need to get done. And I relax. Like, there they are. They're written. My brain is no longer trying to wrangle them from the atmosphere. And so that is, I love the brilliant application of kind of neuroscience to this idea that there are some practical and some pragmatic ways through this bone level exhaustion that most of us are walking around with. Summertime and even the start of the school year, you guys, can mean a season of spending, right? Like vacays and staycays, splurges, parties, celebrations, and then of course, all the back to school stuff. But are you spending the right way or the responsible way? I know it's boring, but important. So maybe check out Chime. They have an online checking account tons of benefits. Millions of members love them. Like fee-free overdraft up to $200 plus, you guys. You can get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit and manage your money on the go, like all the time, 24/7. With Chime, you also have access to more than 60,000 fee-free ATMs. That's more than the top 3 national banks combined. You can also pay family and friends super easily through Chime, no matter what bank account they use. And you can cash out your money fee-free. It all basically means more time and money for whatever floats your boat. And of course, with Chime, there are no monthly fees, no minimum balance, no deposit required to become a member. So sign up for Chime today and keep making this summer the best one yet for yourself and certainly for your wallet. Get started at chime.com/forthelove. You guys, that's chime.com/forthelove. Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and debt card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Access to direct deposits up to 2 days early depends on the timing of the submission of the payment file from the payer. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes, even often, we're faced with tough choices. All of us, really. Sometimes the path forward isn't that clear at all. So, really, show me a human person who hasn't dealt with this. Decisions around, you name it, career, relationships, family, so many things. And I've been there, of course. And therapy helped me. It helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate everything life throws at you. So you can move forward, not just with confidence, but even like excitement. I've learned that trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. Like the more you practice it, the easier it gets. And so if you're thinking of trying therapy, just think about trying BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's convenient and flexible, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a really brief questionnaire and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you need to. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/forthelove today and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forthelove. Would you say in your practice, and this is obviously your specialty, what you deal with most days, do you notice patterns with your patients in terms of which rest of course, everybody is different and every life is different. There's just no two bodies that are the same. But do you notice a pattern in the types of rest that are most often neglected?
Yeah, we have a free assessment at restquiz.com. So we've had over 250,000 people taking the assessment at this point. And so we have lots of statistics and data related to these changes. A couple that I'll mention that we see quite often that tend to be surprising to people. One is sensory rest. Sensory rest deficits are extremely high. They jumped up during COVID because we all moved to more gadgets than we normally even use. And so with sensory rest deficits, you have to evaluate what are the sensory inputs in your life. Everything from if you're working from home and the kids are there and you're hearing them laughing and, doing stuff all day long. You may think you're tuning that out, but your brain has to process it to tune it out. So your brain's getting exhausted in the tuning out of it for you. And so whether that's you're at your office space where you're hearing elevators or phones ringing or, whatever the background, or if you're in retail and you're hearing cash registers go off, whatever the background noise is, the only way you tune it out is for your brain to be actively working. And so high levels of sensory input can lead to sensory overload syndrome. And a lot of us don't recognize our body's response. It's just natural response to sensory overload. It's no different than if you have a 2-year-old and you take them to like a birthday party. They're good the first hour, but then like an hour and a half, 2 hours in, they're screaming their head off. They're banging their feet on the ground. They've experienced sensory overload. And the reaction to that is usually irritation, agitation, rage, or anger. It's the reason why road rage is so bad in the evening and not in the morning. We're not sensory overloaded in the morning, but after we've had a full day of work, we're sensory overloaded. And that last honk of that horn in front of you is too much. And so we have to be aware that all of the sensory inputs have an effect on us. So whether that's the notifications from our phones that are going off all day long, or if we're on our computer screens for the majority of the day, we need to integrate times of sensory reprieve. And so that could look like if you're working at home and maybe having a 30-minute break where you put noise cancellation earphones on where you don't hear anybody. They need you. They need to open up the door and actually come get you. Or where you turn the notifications off on your phone and you just go into the app when you want to look at social media rather than let social media push you little stress bombs all day long, where we kind of have better control over the sensory inputs in our day and mitigate them to some degree so that the ones we can avoid, like you need to keep your phone and your text on because your kids might need you, right? But you don't really need someone to be able to DM you and Instagram every time that they want to send something immediately. Real friends are going to contact you in ways that others can't. And so just kind of being aware of that. Another one that we find very often people are not aware of is creative rest deficits.
Right. You said that and my brain was like, what does that mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's one that, well, you've likely experienced creative rest and didn't have a term for it. So if you're someone who has ever been to like the beach or the mountains or some natural setting where you're like, I just feel at peace here. Like my soul breathes in this atmosphere, whatever that is, you've experienced creative rest. It's the rest we experience when we allow ourselves to experience beauty in whatever form, whether it's natural beauty like the ocean and the mountains and the trees and all of that, or if it's man-made beauty like art and music or dance or theater. And the reason it's important is because most of us use an excessive amount of creative energy throughout the day. We just don't consider ourselves creative. And so if you're someone who's having to think outside of the box, solve problems, if you're a mom and you're having to try to figure out how to get one child to soccer and the other one to ballet, and you got 10 minutes to travel, 40 minutes worth of time, you're having to use creative energy to figure all of these schedules out. You're using creative energy every time you have to come up with a diagnosis if you're someone in healthcare. And so when you're using creative energy, that part of you can become depleted and it's filled back up through ways that inspire you. So it's important to kind of identify what are the ways I get inspired and filled back up in that area of creativity and innovation, because failure to do that leads to a feeling of depletion that we can't fix simply by sleeping.
Let's take it from sort of the negative space. I feel like most of us, certainly myself included, I tend to treat rest as something I will work on when I have time for it. Right. When this season is over, when I get this thing, when this deadline is behind me, when this week, I could do this all year long. I could say, well, this is just a real busy week. Next week, I'm going to exhale, and it won't. Next week is also busy. But that's the way I treat it, as if I'm about to get there. I'm just life and stuff, but I'm about to get there. However, that is a terrible way to look at this. Very self-defeating, actually. And so I have learned that if I don't rest in more ways than just sleep, as you've mentioned, my body will decide for me that, oh, you will rest. So can you talk about some of the things that happen, maybe on a sliding scale from sort of minor to major, the things that happen or could happen when we fail to prioritize rest at all in our lives?
Yeah, that's so important. And you're right. Most of us have lost all respect for rest. We have great respect for work and we see it as the end all, but we don't really recognize that rest is actually what prepares us to be able to sustain ourselves within the work. Some of the side effects are the things that can occur when people fail to rest. Medically, when we fail to rest, we have increased cortisol levels, which then add to increased inflammation, which then add to every type of metabolic disorder that's out there, from high blood pressure, cancer, stroke, diabetes, heart disease, all the things. But then to even just kind of bring it more to a ground level, so to speak, for people, it strains your relationships. One of the types of rest is social rest. Our relationships get strained when we're exhausted. It's hard to be gracious. It's hard to be kind, compassionate when you're tired. It's hard to be able to keep maintaining the levels of emotional labor that a lot of us use within our jobs to be able to function in a capacity when we don't have any more energy. It strains our ability to have a healthy mental outlook. You mentioned that this has a huge impact on mental health, and it does. One of the things that I'm a big biology geek, and so my kids have a tendency to be a little bit like that too. So one of my sons was doing a project on bees during the time that I was writing and doing the research, and as we were studying this project together, one of the things that really just became very evident. These honeybees they're known for being busy as a bee. They're so busy making all this honey and all this sweetness for the world, but they never stop to actually taste the goodness that they create for others. And when I saw that, I was like, that has been my life. And I see it so often in people who are highly successful. We see movie stars and all of these people, and we're like, how did they get to the point where they committed suicide? They were a honeybee. They were producing sweetness for all the world, and they never stopped to actually taste this goodness of their own lives for themselves. And I think that puts all of us at risk. We see burnout as, it just means I'm tired. It actually means you're getting to the end of seeing your own value to take care of yourself.
Right. This is serious. This is real.
It really is.
This isn't optional, which is where, for the majority of my adult life, this conversation has lived in the optional drawer. Like, well, how nice for people who get to do this. And, but it really is dire. This is vital to our longevity, ultimately our health, our mental health, our wellness, our relationships. I'd like to talk about your work through Restorasis. And if you could talk about that for a second. And this episode is airing at a real specific time of year toward the end. And I'd really like to parse out this concept of avoiding burnout. The holidays, look, all I know is as my lived experience as a woman. So I don't know how men experience the end of the year, but I know for women, those of us who are doing everything we always all do, our jobs, our life, and then we have everything else on top of it that piles on. Then those expectations seem to grow every year. With the holiday expectations are generally displaced onto the shoulders of women. So let's talk about Restorasis, and let's talk about some of the even simple steps that we can take to avoid just wearing ourselves so thin that we're just praying for January to get here, thus missing every beautiful thing we're supposed to be experiencing, right? About the holidays and togetherness and celebration. Like, I can't count how many years that just went right over my head, because I'm like, I'm too tired to care. Like, just open your presents, damn it. Like, I just, can it be over? I just want to go to bed. So if we don't want to have that experience, what are some better approaches this season?
Yeah, I love that question. So you mentioned about Restorasis. Restorasis is a work-life integration initiative, really, that then transitioned over into a company. My book, Sacred Rest, when it came out, kind of took a life of its own, for lack of a better word.
You hit a nerve, did you?
I hit a nerve, apparently.
Yeah.
And then TED Talks actually put it out on the talk that I did, and it just kind of did its own thing. So what ended up happening after that, I got so many requests from corporations and companies that were like, look, our people are struggling and we need insight on how do we help people restore? Because one of the things I talk about in Sacred Rest is vacations and sabbaticals are not how we fix this. We don't fix this by taking a week off here and a week off there. That's great. Take the vacation, have fun. But it's really about integrating rest and restorative practices in the middle of our already busy lives. I mean, I'm a physician. I don't get a whole lot of time off. I had to figure out, how do I sustain in the process of living a life like everybody else does, where you work 40, 50 hours a week and do all the things with your family and your kids. And so that's what we do. We come into companies and we actually help train their people on how to bring restorative practices in the middle of their workday. So whether they are tech companies or teachers or construction workers, we've worked with just about every industry around the world now, global companies as well as local small businesses. And how do we take your current stressors within your organization and look at ways to mitigate that stress, not try to manage stress? I don't believe stress management exists. You can't manage something you can't control. You can't control the changes in some industries, but you can change how you restore from the challenge and the stressor. And that's the part that we thrive to really help companies bridge the gap between. And as far as
that's amazing, because look, I don't care if these CEOs and these company owners have a heart of stone. This is good for the bottom line. This means less illness, less absences, less people quitting their jobs. Like, this is probably good for not just company morale, but company production. And success. This is a business practice, really, at the end of the day. If you want to take the most clinical, dehumanized view of it, but this is just smart. This is smart for anybody to care about the rest and wellness of their employees. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. Back to as people are listening to you, going yes, 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 and we knowing that we are approaching and already inside a season that tends to be just disproportionately exhausting.
Yeah, the holidays tend to have a high increase, particularly in emotional rest deficits, because some of us don't have happy family situations. And so, or we're grieving somebody that we've recently lost. There's a lot, that goes along with the holidays. And so one of the things that we try to help people do is understand that there has to be boundaries set even within happy things like, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and all the things that come at the end of the year, that we need to have boundaries that are set so that expectations don't lead to us getting into becoming people pleasers because other people have expectations that are not healthy for ourselves. And so, with my kids, one of the things that we have started to do is, rather than having this kind of regimented system where it's like, oh, we got to stress over what present we're going to get each other. We're at a stage, and I'll just say this may sound horrible to say, but we're at a stage where we just buy what we want when we want to buy it. I mean, it just is what it is. My kids, when they want something, it's like, we just went and got it. So when Christmas turns around, I get stressed for hours and for days, really, trying to surprise them with something. So what our family is focused now on is, how can I surprise you with something that is actually going to boost you internally? So for example, a gift that's actually going to speak to my soul, not to my spirit, I should say, not to my soul and not to my intellect. And so I'll give an example. Last year, one of my sons got me this little, it's like a bracelet that had a saying on it that was very meaningful to me, something that most people would not even have known. But it's something that he heard me say during a church service one time when I was like, wow, that scripture really spoke to me. And the bracelet basically had that on it. The bracelet probably cost $10. I mean, you know what I mean? It was,
I get it.
It was from one of those.
Yeah, but that's right to the heart.
Exactly. Yeah. It meant more to me than if he went and got his dad to buy some gigantic, costly thing. And so when we focus our attention on caring for the people that are in front of us, for loving them well, to showing that we see them, that's the kind of spirit that I think most of us really want our holidays to be about. Not about who got the biggest gift and who spent the most money or didn't spend the most money. And for families who don't have, finances like where you can just buy whatever you want, then focus the attention on something other than the monetary aspect of it. Focus it back on, how do we love each other well?
I like that. Yeah, I love that. And that does shift a gear. It does. It puts us into completely different headspace when we start thinking about, how could this time be meaningful, not just more. So I think that's fantastic advice. So you guys, here's the thing. I definitely play favorites in the kitchen. I have my go-to skillet and cookware that I always use and that I've used a million times over, and typically I don't stray. However, I recently added a new pan into rotation and I'm obsessed. It's from a bakeware and cookware brand called Caraway. You maybe have heard of it. They make super high quality and ceramic coated kitchenware with just a very naturally slick surface. But the real deal here is that it's also free of toxic forever chemicals that you may be hearing about lately in other nonstick pans. But also, you guys, I'm not joking. These pans are gorgeous. What really caught my eye were the colors. Sorry, I am who I am. Like sage, marigold, rose quartz, and this gorgeous silt green, which is the one that I have. Anyhow, I love cooking in my Caraway. Eggs are an absolute breeze. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Sauteing veggies, all of it. And without hardly any oil because it doesn't stick. Their cookware sets also include complimentary easy access storage solutions, like little hanger things for the lids and little things you can set your pans in upright. It's awesome. It's just awesome. No more disorganized pans and pot lids strewn everywhere. So you want to check them out? Don't miss Caraway's Summer Refresh event through July 15th with 10% off the whole site wide. This is also, you guys, a perfect gift. Newlyweds, graduates, housewarming, you name it. Just visit carawayhome.com/forthelove and you'll get 10% off during their summer refresh event. Certain exclusions apply. That's carawayhome.com/forthelove or use the code forthelove at checkout. Caraway, you guys, it's so great. Non-toxic cookware made modern. I'd like to hear you just for a minute talk a little bit more. You mentioned this briefly a minute ago in one of your answers, but I think it was triggering for me in a good way because I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I tend to feel the edges fray the most when I am depleted, which is in my relationships. And even specifically, I know which relationships, because I test which ones can handle my displaced exhaustion and anxiety. And then God bless them, And so I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about both the downside and the upside of what our lives can look like relationally when all of a sudden we decide to take this seriously and to put our bodies into states of restoration. And so that we just simply have more gas in the tank for the people that we love. Because relationally, I think is often where I feel the strain. And for me also, it's not just that I displace my anxiety and I'm high. It's that I go invisible. I disappear. I feel like I don't have the capacity for you. I can't handle this conversation. I can't handle the energy that this is going to require. I'm just out. And so I kind of disappear into a dark corner. So can you talk about that a little bit, like both what you see and what you experience and what we could expect?
Yeah. So that brings actually into the conversation two of the types of rest we haven't really discussed, one of which is emotional and social. They both deal with people. So I'll discuss them together. Emotional rest is the rest you experience when you feel very open and free to share your feelings authentically without having to make them palatable to someone else. Social rest is looking at specifically the relationships and how they pull on your energy. And so some of your relationships negatively pull from your energy and some of them are more positive and life-giving. They pour back in. And it's not to say that the relationship itself is negative or positive. It's just the nature of how the relationship pulls on you. For example, kids have a tendency to be negatively pulling on your social energy. A spouse could be both, a significant other could be both. They could pull or give. And so we have to look at relationships to make sure that they're not pulling or kind of becoming one-sided. so that they're not getting to a place where you're always on the giving end and they're always receiving, and you're never getting an opportunity to be receiving from them. Like I said, if you have small kids, they can't really give a whole lot. They don't, they're just takers. That's just how they're put together. That's just what they are. So your job in that situation is just to keep giving. But then you have to identify who are the people in your life who are life-giving to you. Who are the people that can pour back into you? Because, long before COVID, statistics showed that most of us had fewer adult friends than ever. All of our attention was given to family and work. That's all we had energy for. And we put aside those positive, life-giving relationships because we thought they had no value. But actually, their value is to actually help us stay affirmed, to help us see the value in ourselves, to have those people who are speaking life back into you so that you then have capacity and energy and you fill up that social well to give to the people who are taking from you. And so I think it's important to look at that. Who are the people who you spend time with, whether it's, and honestly, it may be virtual. It may be a friend that, every now, I'll share it like this. I have two friends who we live across the world from each other. One's in Canada, the other one's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. Every month we get together at least once to have an hour where we just kind of have conversation with each other, and we just our social rest circle, so to speak. However, when I have moments when I'm feeling particularly down and particularly drained in the area of relationships, I will text the comment, "Tell me something good." Some of you just heard the song playing in your head. So that's kind of where it came from. And it's not tell me something good about the world. Tell me something good about me, because I'm not feeling too good about me right now. So tell me something good about me so that I get built back up a little bit. And it's kind of your girlfriend rah-rah circle. So I had a big event recently. I'm speaking on a stage with 10,000 women. And, this biggest event I've ever been at, one of those arenas where you can't even see the people. You're just talking to the air. So I'm like, tell me something good. And your rah-rah circle goes, girl, you got this. You were born for this. This is your moment. Step out into it. Have fun. You need those people who are going to just build you up when you feel like I just want to go lay on the floor somewhere.
That's so good. Boy, that's real powerful. It is. Like I have those people in my life. I have those girlfriends. They're so high a priority. They're just right up there next to family. And it re-energizes us for the other relationships in which we're the primary giver. I love that. I love hearing you say that is a type of rest. I would never have equated that level of like support and encouragement with rest, but that is a social restoration. Yes. It is.
You can recline into those relationships. So when I think about rest is where can I lay my head in each of these 7 areas? There are some people in my life that socially I can lay my head down. I don't have to strive. They don't care if I ever publish another book, step on another stage.
Totally.
They don't care about any of that stuff. So you have to have those people in your life too.
I love that question. Last, before we kind of end this incredible conversation, can you give us 2, 3, 4 recommendations, maybe for taking baby steps, if you will, into caring better for ourselves, into steering into the kinds of rest, more than just sleep, that we actually need? How would you suggest for the person listening, just going, I'm deficient in every area. I don't even know where to start. Where would we start?
Yeah, that's the question I think we all have to answer. Like, where am I tired? What kind of tired am I?
Where am I tired? Mm-hmm.
So that's where I usually have everyone start at, is first identifying what type of tired are you. That's the reason why we have a rest quiz. I always recommend people start there, taking the assessment at restquiz.com. What they get after that is they get an actual breakdown of all 7 areas so they can see which area they have the greatest deficit in. And so you don't start trying to fix all 7. That's overwhelming. Pick the one that is your greatest area of deficit. Once you've identified that, then start thinking about 1 or 2 restorative processes you can begin to experiment with. Because just like with everything else, I'm a doctor, if someone has high blood pressure, I got about 100 different pills I could give someone. And every pill is not going to work for every person. So every restorative activity doesn't work for every person. Your personality, where you live, your lifestyle, all of those things play a factor in it. So sample a couple of different restorative processes, find the one that leaves you feeling better, and then incorporate that one into your life in some way, whether that's you're going to do it on the weekend or you're going to find a block of time, 5 minutes. Oftentimes, a lot of these restorative practices can be done within a 5-minute block in the middle of the day somewhere.
That's important to hear.
And if you don't have 5 minutes, we got bigger problems because every one of us should have 5 minutes within our day.
That's so important to hear. Just in case somebody's out there thinking, I can't just lounge around all day. That is not what you're suggesting at all. And that's not even the solution. Like, these are almost, in some ways, they can be micro moves with a huge impact. Can you, obviously, we have barely scratched the surface here. Your book parses this out in great detail. How did you find the writing process? Writing a book is a whole deal. I mean, there's one thing to know what you're talking about with your medical brain, and there is another thing to turn that into a book, which is a completely different muscle. Did you enjoy the writing process?
Well, I had the benefit of this being my third book, so that was good. I'd already kind of gone through it a couple of times. But the writing process for me is not something I particularly enjoy. I enjoy the research. My background is in biochemistry, so I love research. The writing process, and you'll notice with my writing style is more conversational than it is medical. Because for myself, when I write a book that I'm an audiobook listener. I love audiobooks. So I write a book with the mindset of, I'm going to be telling somebody this book. And so I write it in that way. I write it in a conversational type way with the science integrated into the conversation. I find that for myself, it feels more natural to my personality. And I think that's what's helped me with the writing process. It's just not getting caught up in the fact that, oh, you're an expert. You can't talk about your sex life with your husband, or you can't talk about your insecurities. It's like, I'm human, just like everybody else. So I'm going to have a real conversation. I'm going to enjoy emotional rest in the book that I'm spending my energy writing. If I'm going to put the effort forth, I'm going to experience rest in those areas as well.
Fantastic. And obviously, my listeners, the book is called Sacred Rest. Recover your life, renew your energy, restore your sanity. Yes, yes, and yes. And they can get it wherever books are sold, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then the rest quiz, will you say that website one more time?
Very simple. Just restquiz.com.
Great. You guys, I will put all these links up for you in one place so you can, and then also follow you on socials and just kind of be under your leadership in general. I think you are singing a song. Most of us want to sing as well. And so I'm so grateful that you are putting your hand to this work. I really think this matters. It feels overlooked. It feels under talked about. We have that American can-do spirit. So it's just like we expect everybody to just go forever on fumes. And so this feels like a really important conversation. I'm so glad to have it with you. Last question, very finally, the real last question. Dr. Saundra, I ask everybody this question, no matter what series that their interview is in. I borrowed this actually from an Episcopal priest who I love. Her name is Barbara Brown Taylor, and this was her question. And you can answer it however you want. What is saving your life right now?
What is saving my life right now is understanding that I have worth and value.
Ooh, wow. That was a deep answer. I love that. It feels like the thing we're chasing most of our lives.
It's what exhausted me. For a season, my work and my worth were tied up together. If I wasn't working, I wasn't worthy. Yeah. I no longer believe that. I believe my worth is still intact when I sit down and rest.
We couldn't finish on a better note than that. That's it. Drop the mic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for this really actually really just hopeful conversation. I love hearing you talk about this is possible for everyone, no matter how busy we are. This is possible. This is not out of reach for anybody at all. And so everybody run your little feet to get Dr. Saundra's book and take her quiz and make this a priority. And let's kind of not just reclaim this season, but the way that we're moving through the world. And we can push back against this do more, be more mentality that we've been handed since we were little. So thanks for being on. Delighted to have met you today.
You as well. It's been my pleasure.
All right, you guys. Great. Look no further. Where you start is that quiz. Okay. Restquiz.com. It's free. Over at jenhatmaker.com underneath the podcast tab. Not only will I have this episode, should you like to share it, send it to your young adults. Don't you wish somebody would have taught us this when we were in our 20s instead of trying to like retrofit it into our lives in our like 30s, 40s, and 50s? Send this one to your young kiddos. But I'll have the quiz, I'll have her book, I'll have her socials, I'll have all the links that you might be interested in over there for you. No one's going to do this for us. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one's coming to our rescue. No one is going to tell us how to restore. No one is going to take a bunch of responsibilities off our plate either. And so this is on us. To discover a different way of moving through the world. And I'm just delighted to learn that we can, and it's possible, and our worth is inherent and not just because of all we're producing. And so rest puts nothing in jeopardy, nothing at all. And rather it elevates every other category of our life. So this whole series is so sweet. It's sweet like this, for the love of peace. And we are hoping to just inject your sweet life with restoration and a sense of being centered and rested and calm and peaceful. And so I hope that's what you take away from this entire series. I can't wait for next week's episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, do so. And you'll never miss another episode as long as we shall keep recording them, which hopefully is forever, because we sure love creating this show for you. All right, you guys, see you next week.